Guys, today I'm going to be teaching you some of the tips and tricks about making some really good bread. This is a garlic rosemary bread. The flavors of garlic and rosemary don't necessarily knock you over. They're subtle. It's a gentle hint of flavor in the backside of this delicious bread. Give this a try. I'm sure you're going to love it. Well, howdy folks, welcome to Texas Cooking Today. What you're watching here is a Texas Cooking Today tutorial. These are very in-depth videos on the techniques and methodology used to make any of my recipes. So anytime that you see one of my recipes that says tutorial, that's what this is. Now if you just want the recipe, you don't want the extra information, that's the previous episode, guys, so check that out if you would. This one is going to teach you everything you need to know about making this recipe. Now let's get on with it. Oh guys, that's good looking, isn't it? This is a wonderful tasting recipe. This is called garlic rosemary bread. So you'll know, I've used a previous recipe of mine and I've adapted it, made some modifications to make this wonderful tasting bread. If you watched the previous episode and you have questions, well guys, you're about to have all of those questions answered. This is a fantastic tasting bread and I'm about to give you a lot of information on bread making. So some things that you never knew are probably going to come up, and some methods and techniques that maybe you hadn't considered are going to be thrown out there. So that beautiful looking bread, let's get in the kitchen and get it made up. Come on, let's go. Guys, here we are with some fantastic ingredients. All right, so you'll know we're going to be using all-purpose flour. Now, if you're wondering, hey, well, you're making bread, why aren't you using a bread flour? Guys, you don't have to use a bread flour to make bread. You can't use cake flour because there simply is not enough gluten in it. Bread flour has a lot of gluten, and thus it provides very good structure in your bread. And if you want to use that, you can in this recipe, but it's not a requirement and it's not needed. This recipe will work fine using an all-purpose flour, and that is what I am making this one out of. This is all-purpose flour. Olive oil. We're going to be using some olive oil, and we're going to, believe it or not, going to be cooking up our flavorants in the olive oil, and then using the olive oil to pass that flavor to the bread. That's the reason I'm not going to actually have the rosemary or garlic itself in the bread. Simply they're essential oils. I want to show you how we do that. Now, we have water here. Also, some yeast, salt, sugar, and as you know, our rosemary and garlic. Guys, this isn't tough, but we need to start by preparing our oil mixture first, and that way it'll have time to cool off by the time we start our bread. Another thing you need to be aware of, you're going to be seeing me use a mixer on this show. Guys, you don't have to have a mixer either, okay? If you don't have a mixer, it isn't necessary when it comes to making bread. All right, now there is an old technique that bakers have been using, well, literally for centuries. What did a baker do? Did he sit there and knead dough for hours and hours and hours on end to get each loaf? No, he didn't, and that's not necessary. The whole idea of the kneading process using a mixer is to help to develop the gluten in the dough, get everything mixed well, and also to develop that gluten. The yeast is going to do what it does regardless, okay? Now, here's how you do it without your mixer. You'll simply use the bowl that you're going to rise your dough in, and I recommend a glass or ceramic bowl because yeast will react with metals. So stick with the glass and ceramic. Use a glass or ceramic bowl. Mix all of your ingredients together except for the yeast, all right? Leave the yeast out. You mix it all together and you set it aside covered. And what you're doing is a process called autolyzing. Autolyzing allows the dough's gluten to develop on its own. And a long time ago, before mixers were ever developed, this is how bakers would do large batches of bread dough without having machinery or using heavy arm labor, all right? It's just that simple. After it autolyzes, takes about 30 minutes to an hour, give it plenty of time to develop, then knead your yeast or mix your yeast into the dough. Mix it in thoroughly, knead it well, and then let it go into its rising cycle. That's how to autolyze your dough. Now here, I've got a mixer, so I'm going to use a mixer. And if you have a mixer, I'm going to recommend you do the same thing. If you don't, just remember what I just said. You can still make this bread. Now guys, the first thing we need to do, our garlic, our rosemary needs to be prepared in just the right way to make this bread taste just right. Let's get on with that. Okay guys, we need to get our garlic and our rosemary prepared for our bread. Now here's the thing, I don't want to use rosemary directly in my bread, all right? What you've seen me do there is I've just stripped off some of those leaves. It's not going to take a whole lot of rosemary leaves, all right? So you guys know rosemary is a potent herb and it goes a long, long way. And you're not going to need just a huge amount of it to make this work. So a total of about 1 tablespoon of chopped rosemary should be more than sufficient. So that's what I'm going to do. And it doesn't have to be a fine chop. A coarse chop will be more than adequate. So there we have about 1 tablespoon of chopped rosemary. Our garlic, on this, just break these open. Now in case you've never seen me do this before, one of the neatest ways I have of getting in past the paper on one of these cloves, I'm about to show you. And this is really simple. Now guys, so you'll know, how much garlic are we going to use? Well, the equivalent of a couple of tablespoons actually. Okay, so what I want here, to get this paper off, I just firmly grip that clove in both hands and twist like that, and it breaks the paper loose. Isn't that cool? Okay, you don't have to fight it this way. Even on fresh garlic that's got really tight paper on it, this technique works, okay? And it leaves the clove whole, so you can just kind of have them sitting around. You can have them pre-peeled and put in a plastic bag for use later on. It's a neat way to do your garlic. Okay guys, normally when you see me prep out garlic, I'll cut the scab off and do a lot of other mincing and stuff like that. Not necessary on these. All we have to do is just give them a good crush, okay? Now if you want to cut them up, you can do that also. It doesn't matter. You can just give them a simple light chop like so. And that kind of breaks it down just a little enough. It will allow the essential oils to leach out into our olive oil. Okay, let's get the olive oil in our pan. Now if you'll notice, I'm not actually measuring it, but I've done this enough times. I need a total of about 1/4 cup of olive oil down in here, and that's about what I have right now, okay? Just enough to coat the bottom of the pan well for those items to float in there, okay? Well, they're not really floating, they're against the bottom of the pan. So I'm just going to cook this up for a few minutes. Once I've got that flavor out of the rosemary and the garlic, I'm then going to run all of that through a strainer into this bowl, and there is my flavored oil. Isn't that lovely? So the thing of it is, you don't have to cook this very long, and don't cook it over a high heat. Keep it over a medium to medium-low flame, and that way we get just the oil from our rosemary and the garlic, and we're flavoring that olive oil with it. And once it's done, our cooking oil, or I should say the oil that we're going to use in our bread, is ready to go. Okay guys, this has been about 2 minutes, and we're starting to see a little bit of browning in the edges of our garlic. That's how we know it's time, okay? I'll turn off the heat. I'm going to pour that right down through my strainer. Okay, remember, it's not the garlic or the rosemary pieces that we need. It's that oil. That right there has everything that we need to flavor our garlic rosemary bread. Now guys, I have my mixer here. Yes, I broke out a whisk. What we're going to do is first start by combining our dry ingredients. So, my flour goes in. At this point, I go ahead and I sprinkle in my sugar and yeast. There we go. Give that a little stir. I'll sprinkle in my salt. Give that a stir. Okay, now the thing of it is When you're using a mixer, what I just did there is a really cool way of doing it. Of course, if you're autolyzing, you'll do all of that except for the yeast. You leave the yeast out of it. So for when you're using a mixer, all of the dry ingredients mixed together in one bowl. This technique, believe it or not, works just fine. You don't have to proof your yeast. Modern yeasts are generally very reliable, and as long as it's in date, it should be just fine, okay? Next thing that we need to do is we're going to have to get our liquids right down inside of this. And also, I'm going to need my dough hook. So I pour my water in here. There we go. And this oil has had enough time to cool, so it won't affect anything we're doing here. Close that, and on low speed, get that to combine. Let's get a closer look at what we're doing down in here. Now folks, the reason we don't crank that mixer up on high speed is because that flour will get thrown straight up out of that bowl. When you're dealing with a dry ingredient like this, you have to, well, give it its time, okay? Just kind of be slow and gentle with it. And when we're finished mixing this up, what I'm looking for is a high hydration bread. In other words, a very sticky dough. So as you see, it's all starting to come together now. Just be patient with it as it does its job. Guys, this doesn't really take very long, okay? If you have a mixer, it goes really fast. If you're mixing by hand, it takes about 3 to 4 minutes to get all those ingredients mixed together into a dough ball, and then you just let it set to autolyze. But don't sit and knead it. It's not necessary. Okay, yeah, this is sticky. See, it's already sticking to me, okay? That's what we're looking for, a nice, sticky dough. I'm going to give that about 1 more minute on its kneading. Okay guys, our mixer is finished. It only took it about 4 minutes total time. Now, I'm going to put a little bit of oil down in the bowl that I'm going to rise that in. Now you remember, earlier I mentioned that you don't want to use metal bowls to rise in, okay, because the yeast doesn't react well with metal. So I use glass or ceramic to rise in. That works a lot better. So, I'm going to get that bowl out from underneath it, put this bowl underneath it, and then I'm going to use a spatula to free it off of my dough hook. How do you like that? That's all right. It'll come off of there. Just work it down. There we go. Our dough is freed up from the hook. And the bowl that I'm going to rise it in, all I need to do is put it in a warm location to do its thing. Guys, it's time for us to rise the dough, which means basically it's time to go and watch some videos and enjoy life. There's no rush here. This has to do its thing. I'm getting this beautiful smell of garlic and rosemary up from this bread. It's just lovely smelling. But we have to give it time to do what the yeast does. So I'm going to cover this, and we'll be able to see what that looks like in a little bit after it rises up, okay? Guys, take a look at this dough. This has been 1 hour of rising. Now the dough has risen up. Of course, you see how much it has filled the bowl. Let's look down here on the side. Look at all of that. All of those air pockets. And guys, the inside of the bread is the same way. You know, when you get a bread that has a neat texture and it has all of those air pockets up inside of it, that is a fantastic, neat kind of texture. And what brings you that texture is having a high hydration rate. That's the real catch, the real trick. The more moisture you have in that dough, the more of that coarse grain you have on the inside of the bread. They actually call that the crumb of the bread. And you can have an even smooth crumb like you get with white bread, or you can have something coarse like with French bread. And that's what's the difference here. Now, isn't that wonderful? So what we're going to do, now that this has risen, I'm going to transfer it to a separate pan. We've got this little guy right down here. We're going to move all of that into that pan, and once it is in there, I'm going to rise it again on that same baking sheet with the same glass bowl over the top as a dome. Guys, just as I did earlier with my glass bowl, I need just a little bit of oil. Now remember, this is a non-stick surface, but even non-stick surfaces, well, they have their issues, okay? So I'm going to put this oil onto the surface. That way, once this is baked up, it's going to release, and also that oil is going to help with giving a wonderful golden crust to the outside of our dough. So what we have here, remember, this stuff is sticky and it's going to stick to your hands, so I recommend let's just use a spatula. There we go. Now, so here's the thing, you know, you've always heard punch your dough down. Well guys, what we have just done there on a high hydration dough is pretty much the same exact thing. Once you've rolled it out into a new location, that's pretty much the same as punching it down, okay? Looky there. The thing of it is, why do I put my dough here in this pan? This is something you need to know about. When you're dealing with doughs like this, especially high hydration doughs, if I were to rise this, let's say on a stone or, you know, on this pan right here, what's going to happen is that dough is going to kind of go flat and out because it's got a lot of moisture in it. So what I do is give it something that holds the side shape just a little bit and gives it a chance to start doming. So this allows it to go out, but it controls how far out it goes. And a neat way to do your dough. You can cook dough in a cake pan like this anytime you want, guys, and it's not unusual. So the thing of it is now, it's a matter of giving it time. Now guys, we have about, let's see here, I'm about 36 minutes in on this rise, and it's almost touching my glass. Now look at this. On some places it's starting to overflow that edge. Don't worry about that at all, guys. It's not going to be a condition or an issue to worry about. But look how kind of rough and uniquely shaped it is. This dough has come close to doubling in bulk. I'm going to give it a little bit more time and let it just kind of fill up a little more and dome just slightly more. And then I'm going to mist it with some water and hit it with some salt, and we're going to bake it up. You're going to need your oven set at 400 degrees, guys. So go ahead and get that sucker preheating right now. That way, when we get this little gem down in there, we're going to have us a beautiful, delicious bread. Now guys, this has been 2 hours total in the rising. 1 hour in the bowl rising, and then I turned it into this. It was given another hour. So what I'm going to do at this point, I'm going to spray it with some water. You can use just a little trigger sprayer. I have a misto here that's wonderful. These things you can pressurize and then spray. And I'm going to put a little salt over it. Now some large crystal sea salt works well, or if you've got some Himalayan pink or something like that, that's really cool. That's what I'm going to use today. So here we go, a little spray. And what this will do is it'll soften that upper crust just a little bit. And what it does is it lengthens the amount of time it takes for it to brown. It gives it a thicker crust, darker crust, better quality bread. Okay, now I'm going to give it some of that Himalayan pink like I mentioned. Some nice salt grains over the top of it, and this is ready to go down in the oven. 400 degrees, guys. There we go, guys. That's down in the oven, 400 degrees. Give it time to do what it does, okay? Now, if you want to crisp up that upper crust just a little bit more, that same misting bottle that you used to mist it before putting it in the oven, go ahead and pull it out about every 7 to 10 minutes and give it another good spray across the top. It slows that browning down, it dries the inside of the bread just a little bit better, and it allows a deeper, heavier, harder crust to develop on top. What you're doing when you're spraying the top of it, of course, you're adding moisture to the outer part of that dough. This is very similar to what bakers' ovens do. You see, in a bakery, a baker's bread oven is attached to a water line. So you have a gas line coming to it, an electrical outlet coming to it to fire off the fan that circulates air inside of it because they're convection, and then also they have water sprayers inside, so you have to have a water line that comes to that thing. And it puts constant moisture in the air inside of a baker's oven, and that's what makes that hard, crispy, glossy, crunchy exterior on good quality professional breads. So this is how you can mimic that. You can simply use a spray bottle. Give that a try. Guys, the salt on the outside of that bread is really good. So from here, it's really simple. Depending on your altitude, it's going to take anywhere from roughly 25 to 35 minutes, okay? Keep a close eye on it. When you get a good deep brown and a good hollow sound, that's when you thump it, it's ready. Until then, we just wait some more. Okay guys, we have this thing out of the oven. Now I need to get it out of the pan. I've given it several minutes to cool. Use a fresh, clean towel for this, okay? Now this is really simple. All you need to do is take this guy and flip him upside down and then lift that pan. Once that pan is up and off, whoops, there we go. There we are. I'm going to invert it onto that cooling rack, and it's ready to finish cooling off. There we go, guys. That shows me on a clumsy day what I can still do. And if I can do it, you can do it. What I just did isn't that hard, okay? I think it's still a little warm. Now, you can go ahead and cut this while it's hot, but I recommend giving a bread at least a good 15 to 20 minutes to cool down, minimum, before you even consider cutting into it. Otherwise, you're just going to mangle the interior. On the inside, in the center, it's still cooking and developing and being what it can be. Let it exhaust some of its steam, let it dry a little bit more, let it become the perfect bread that it is. Don't rush cutting this, okay? When it's time to cut it, we'll be able to lift it up with our hands because it won't be that hot. It'll still be warm, and we can slice into it and enjoy it. Guys, we have given this some time to cool down. It's touchable and handleable now, and you won't burn yourself. And what I want to do is I'm just going to make us a cut, not through the middle, but just a little off center here. Oh, there we have it. Isn't that beautiful? We have this wonderful, wonderful bread, guys. This is a fantastic bread. It's very tasty, it's lively, and it's something that really you need to give a try. It's definitely a tasty bread. Now guys, as you see in this show, wonderful tasting bread. The actual recipe itself, so you'll have something to write down. Get out a pen, piece of paper, pause your video here until you get that, and then we're going to give you all of the measurements for what we just cooked up. Okay guys, hopefully you've got that now. What we prepared was 4.5 cups of flour. And that's an all-purpose flour. Now guys, remember on your flour, when it comes to breads, to get the right results, you got to use the right flour. So if you use a cake flour, that's the wrong stuff because there's not enough gluten. A bread flour will work fine for this, but you don't have to spend that extra money. All-purpose flour makes a decent bread, and that's what we used on this one. 1/4 cup of olive oil, 1 3/4 cup of water. This is 4.5 teaspoons of our yeast, 2 teaspoons of salt, 4 teaspoons of sugar, 1 tablespoon, no more than, of your rosemary, and 2 to 2.5 tablespoons of the garlic. And as you saw, we treated these two by cooking them off in that oil and then used the oil to impart the flavor of this wonderful stuff into that bread. It's a good way of doing it, guys. All right, guys, looky there. I've been enjoying this stuff. Nice and crusty. A beautiful crumb. And guys, give it a little more rise time if you want it to be a bit more open on the inside. That was so good. The flavors are spot on. Here's the thing. Wonderful bread. Bread takes time. It's just a matter of patience. This is a good flavor. And I'm going to use this, turn it into croutons. I'm also going to be making some wonderful garlic bread because all I have to do is put butter on it and just give it a toast. It's ready. Guys, delicious bread for sandwiches or just for munching. Thank you very much for watching Texas Cooking Today, folks. If you would, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe. Click the like button, that helps me out a lot. And please drop comments down below. If you have a suggestion or a request, my ears, my eyes, they're open. I do pay attention to what happens in those comment sections, okay? So go ahead, type something out down there. I'll get it, I'll read it, and we'll make changes as necessary, or if you just have something nice to say, I appreciate that too. Guys, thank you for watching this show. Please share my videos, and folks, you just have a good day. Well, there it was, guys. Did that answer all of your questions on how to make that recipe? I certainly hope so. Hey, if you have any requests or questions or comments or anything like that, feel free to drop them in the boxes down below. I do appreciate that, and I read those, believe it or not. Thank you for watching Texas Cooking Today. Folks, please share my videos. And again, thank you very much for watching Texas Cooking Today.